There's a lot of interest in stroke buddies about doing support groups, and so I signed up for Zoom. And like the second month they charged me for it, and I hadn't done anything much with it. I started to say, doesn't do much good to have Zoom if you don't use it. And then Lauren got in touch with me and was talking about this idea, and I said, well, I have Zoom and I haven't used it, and I could use a good kick in the butt, to be honest, and maybe this is it. So we decided that our interests were similar in wanting to know what people wanted. Lauren and her company, Med Rhythms, is going to start a Facebook group in order to better understand what we as stroke survivors feel that we need in our recoveries. And so, and I am, I guess I'm being asked to run stroke survivor support groups, which I have no problem being asked to do or doing. However, my experience is I've run two of them in person, like at the local hospital kind of situation. I'm new to Zoom, so I think the most important thing that you can find out in any support group is what the people want, so that you can give them what they want. Because it's not about me as the host or I already know a bunch, so it's not unless I can do a presentation and impart some of what I know. It's really not about me. It's about what the people in the groups want. And I've been the vice president of a lot of groups in video in my industry, and vice president always does communications and meetings. So the first thing I ever did was I'd like take a survey. What do you people want to hear? And I'd line up speakers and that kind of thing. That's going to be one of my questions. But Lauren's got a few questions. I'm going to turn it over to her, or let her ask hers, because hers are real similar to mine. She sent me 5 questions, and I looked at them and said, well, these are kind of the definitive 5 questions, and pretty much what I'd write down. I could write down a 6, but it'll be a 6. So we'll just let Lauren start off, so it's not all about me talking.
Great, thank you, Ralph. Like Ralph said, the reason I reached out to him is because my company, and thank you also for giving a little bit of an overview in the post about Med Rhythms and what we do. We're interested in building a community like Stroke Buddies for stroke survivors, and we just don't, given that nobody who's employed at the company, myself, my colleagues, we are not stroke survivors. We don't want to just operate under the assumption that we'll build something and the people will come. We want to get to know all of you and figure out what the unmet needs are in terms of content and what we could provide in a Facebook group. And also, what we can provide to people like Ralph, who are doing so much great work, have already built this foundation of these groups, but might not have all of the resources that like a full company like Med Rhythms has, and access to different expertise and knowledge bases. So that's kind of the context behind why I reached out to Ralph, and then recognizing that we had so many similarities in terms of what we were curious about, the context for this phone call. So thanks so much for jumping on here. And I guess to kick it off, the first question that Ralph and I were curious about is, what in your opinions are the best things about being part of a Facebook group for stroke survivors?
For me, support and friendship with people like me. People who have gone through what I've gone through, who go through every day what I go through. Something like that.
And do you feel you've met people through the group that you've been able to actually connect with? Obviously online, it's a lot of like,
it's all my connections, just about. There have been a few phone calls, not many people, just not even a handful, but the phone calls. But online, there have been a lot of connections. So I have had connections, gotten support, and good advice.
Mm.
Also
Listen,
being positive.
okay, go ahead, Winnie.
Being positive is really important. Your attitude about having a stroke, because there are days, I'm sorry, there are days that you feel so down, but yet with this group, you can have an uplift.
Mm.
Well,
That's well put, Winnie. That's great. That's so true. That's so true.
I think that I know I felt this way. I can't speak for the other people. I don't see her name. Welcome. Um, I know I felt this way in the beginning. I lived out in a rural area, and but my stroke really isolated me all the more. I felt like I was the only one in the world going through what I was going through. And when I went back, I started going back to actually Tuesday and Thursday in-house stroke groups at the rehab hospital I was in, because I wanted to provide some hope for the people that went there. Because when I first started going there, I saw there were a lot of people with no hope. Anyhow, and then I started going to the monthly stroke group they had at that rehab hospital. And all of a sudden I realized there are a lot of people going through this. And then I started looking it up, and there are 800,000 people a year have a stroke in the United States. Something like almost 600,000 of them were their first stroke. So you have, there's a lot of people who go through this, and we're not alone, but we tend to feel alone. And the other thing that occurred to me at that point was, gosh, they're asking 800,000 of us to reinvent the wheel for ourselves. If everybody's got to do the same thing, there's got to be some way to pool resources, share information. I'm a video guy, and of course I thought, well, I'll just make the definitive DVD on stroke recovery. And I shopped that idea. A lot of people were interested. I ended up not being able to find anybody who was willing to finance the whole thing, because it got up into hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what I was talking about doing. So I ended up doing a YouTube channel, pointing the camera at myself, which I hate, but people like my videos, so.
I like what I've seen. It came out great, even though you're the cameraman and the actor. Sometimes that works.
Some of them lately, in the pandemic, I've shot a few, and now that myself and my cameraman have been vaccinated, we've got another shoot. I typically hire a cameraman. It's funny, I was telling Laura this, so that I don't have to do that. I've got a friend of mine who I pay to be the cameraman so that I can concentrate on what I'm doing. And I also voice them over, because I don't want to have to walk and talk at the same time. So I just demonstrate whatever, and then I write a script and talk over it later. I also.
Linda, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask a follow-up to that. So you mentioned that you like the content that Ralph's providing on the Facebook group. What is it about those videos that you like?
I'm kind of embarrassed. I've only seen 2 videos with Ralph in them, and then one of something called an Ogo. That Ogo was adorable. It amazes me. But it's all interesting and something you can learn from. So both interest and something helpful and positive for me. The videos are all very positive. There's no nothing, no downside to them, which is nice. As Winnie said, when you have a stroke, having something upbeat and positive is always really nice.
Mm.
Well, I can give you a little feedback. I'll try and do without tooting my own horn here, from the things that I hear from people about the videos that I make. Couple things I always hear, I've heard a number of times. I like the fact that it's just the exercise. You don't talk. It's all content. I also hear, I like the fact that I see you doing them as a stroke survivor. So they can see that I'm not perfect. I will tell you that I consider myself fully recovered. And I can tell you that somebody who had a stroke yesterday who's sitting in the hospital might watch me have a little hip dip or shake in my hand or something and say, well, you're not fully recovered, because they want to go back to the way they were yesterday. And what they don't realize yet is there's no going back. So I have a list of other things that are important to me in terms of considering myself fully recovered. And they're like things like, I dress, I eat, I cook, I drive, I do whatever I want. I help other people. And I always say, and wait for it, I'm happy. So, you know, there's other measuring others. I have a graphic I put up. Some of you may have seen it. It's a bunch of rulers with an international no sign, no measuring. Throw away the old ruler. If you're going to measure, get out a new ruler, a post-stroke ruler. I try and tell people, be the best new you can be. Because I said that out loud as I was getting ready to walk out of the rehab hospital. I was at the nurse's station. It just popped in my head, and I turned to a nurse and I said, I'm going to be the best new me I can be. And that's you know, to me, the way of doing it. The other thing in my videos I do is if I screw up, I leave it in there. I got one coming up with vitamins where I drop like vitamin D, those little teeny pearls, and I'm taking them out with my affected hand. And I drop about 14 of them on the stove, and my camera guy goes, take 2. And I go, hell no. I'll pick them all up, because I'm going to have to pick them all up in real life, right? And so I pick them all up affected hand because the camera's rolling. If it wasn't rolling, I might have picked them up with my other hand. But see, I do that. I take the vitamins with my affected hand every night. I'm 13 years out.
That's a good point. I'm going to start trying to use my affected hand even for little tiny things. I know the size of I take D3s. So they're real. I mean, this is my affected hand, maybe this big. You know, they're real tiny and they roll all over the place.
Right. Try and get them to not roll between your fingers, and then try not to put them in your eye or up your nose, you know,
That's
and
a
get
good
them in your
point.
mouth, you know,
That's
without
a good
like
point.
slamming them. You know, a lot of things we can do fast. So I found that if you can't do something, you can likely do it fast. So you can smash them into your mouth. But what you want to do is have some control over something, you know. You want to be able to close your eyes and find your mouth too. Proprioception.
Wow, that's hard. That's hard for my
Well, I
affected hand.
practice it. Okay, here's a way. Lauren, do you care if we jump all over the place?
Oh, I don't care at all.
Okay.
And I just wanted to give
Thank
some
you,
credit
Lauren.
to Dorothy. Thanks so much for joining us. We were just talking about what people who are members of the Facebook group, what they enjoy in terms of content and posts and things like that. So that's where you jumped in.
No problem. And I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh,
no
don't
worries.
be sorry, we're glad you're here. It said Dorothy there for a second. Was that your
No, I was going, if I should or not, I should or not. And I didn't know. And I thought, I just take a look. And there you were. And I said, all right, I'm going to go. Sorry.
There's Chris Moore. He said he was going to come. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Anyway, we'll let him join and figure it out. Linda, here's what I did for proprioception. Okay. I got some 3M sticky notes, right? And I took a sticky note and I stuck it here on the wall. And then with my eyes open, I would touch it.
Oh.
And then I'd close my eyes and I would keep touching it. Because once you do it with your eyes open, your brain will make a map as to where it is. The easiest way to explain proprioception to people is put your good hand in your pocket and you can feel the difference between a quarter and a dime. Everybody can do it. So there are always ways that you can learn, that you can help neuroplasticity. And that's one of them. I found that I use my good side. Leslie Hadley, who's a stroke survivor and a yoga teacher, she uses some terminology that I've stolen. because I like it so much. She refers to it as your teaching side and your healing side. So if you want to
I
know,
like that. I like
a
that.
lot.
Wow.
If you want to know what your healing side should do, just take a look at your teaching side. And we were talking about this last on Sunday in a Zoom thing that we're trying to get going. And William Lowe said something about how when you use your brain, it goes from both sides, and you can use your good side will help with your bad side. And I said, you know, I had this thought about 6 months ago, and I just shot a video. I didn't even know if it would work. It was one take and it worked. So I took 3 potatoes and I set them on the counter. And I tried to pick them up with my affected hand, and it took about 15 seconds because it's not easy to get the second one and then the third one while you're holding on to the first couple. And of course, you have to pick them up and
Wow.
shake them like you really have them. And so it took like 15 seconds. So I said, oh man, I know my right hand is just going to be able to do this. So I did it with my right hand. I went boom, 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 picked them up like 2 seconds. So then without hesitating, I went back to my affected hand again, and I went like boom, boom, boom. And instead of 15 seconds, it took less than 5. And I'm going to post that video because well, I like to make videos that graphically show you. Anybody can look at that video, even without a voiceover or anything, and they can see what happened. They can see that I use one part of my brain to pattern the other part. There's, opposite side therapy. Okay, here we go. So you can use one side to pattern the other. I can't do this at all. I'm going to make faces because I don't like how jerky it is. Let me sit up straight. So that's about the best I can do. When I tie my hair back, I got a hold of it. And I could do this for a month and I'd be able to do it perfectly. But I can't. You can see how jerky it is. Oh boy, that was good and jerky. Okay, watch this. Clearly it's working better, isn't it? Watch this. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I got 3. Oh, there it goes. 4, jerky. Last night, the other night when I did it, I only got 2. I don't practice that a lot. When I learned how to do it when I was learning how to roll my fingers again. And I'd do it 5 times and then do this one 5 times, repattern again and over and over and over again. You can use one side to train the other.
And the power of neuroplasticity is really, really huge. And it's something too that it cuts into so many different aspects of functioning. It's what everything we do at MedRhythms relies on. But it's great to hear that you're putting out that content too, because there is so much misinformation around stroke recovery and what you're capable of doing even later into your stroke recovery. I've heard a lot of stroke survivors say that they were told by clinicians that once they plateau after physical therapy, they can't get any better. And it's just absolutely not the case. And we see people all the time who are 20 years post-stroke. They try music therapy interventions for the first time and they're walking more than double the distance and twice as long. So it's really a total misconception and misinformation that you can't improve.
Lauren, this is kind of an interruption, and I'd love to hear about music therapy. I don't do it, but when I get anxious or upset, which happens a lot with stroke survivors, I listen to music. Does it help? Because I remember when I used to run pre-stroke, and I didn't have my stroke till age 65, so I was older, or at least most of the people I encounter on Facebook were not as old as in their mid-60s when they had their stroke. Does it help when you're trying things to use music, even in the background? Could you speak to that at all? Could you address that, using music while you exercise or try things with your affected side.
Maybe tell us how your product works.
Absolutely. And I'm going to drop some information from our website too, for anybody who wants to continue reading and watching some videos, which we have.
I see it
on here. But basically the answer is yes. Music affects the brain on so many different levels. It's actually the only stimulus that we know of that engages the whole brain simultaneously.
Oh.
So, like you've probably seen like an image that's like a map of the brain with all of the different regions. Typically when you're doing something or you're exposed to an external stimulus, only like 1 or 2 or 3 of those regions light up and are activated. But when you hear, just simply hearing a rhythmic stimulus, like in music, your entire brain is engaged. And what that does is it allows for different parts of the brain to interact in a way that actually can help strengthen different parts of the brain that might have been damaged. So it is really important for somebody who's had a stroke that might affect their music or their speech region to be able to try to retrain that part of the brain while using music, because every other element of the brain is also engaged, including the healthy, unaffected regions. What that does is it kind of creates, you can think of it as like, neuro connections or bridges between like the unhealthy to the healthy regions of the brain that are forged because of music. And when you're doing it, when you're, for example, walking to music.
That's what I was wondering. Go on, please.
Yeah, it's engaging so many different parts of your brain, that some of which are healthy, some of which might be unhealthy if you have an impairment to the motor region. But it allows you to do things, what we see is it allows you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do without that stimulus. And over time, if you continue engaging in that way, like what Ralph said, it actually, once you take the music away, you can retain some of those increases and improvements in functioning, such as walking speed. If your issue is more, say you have aphasia and it affects your speech, there are these standardized interventions called melodic intonation therapy, for example, where you practice speaking, but through singing to a beat.
Wow.
And it helps in the same way, like with walking, if the motor region is connected to these other healthier regions, in a similar way, the speech and language centers of the brain, if that's what's impaired, they connect with the other healthier regions. And you can actually hear people who typically don't have, the ability to finish full sentences at all, actually really improve their fluency when they're putting it to a rhythm. And it all comes back to that global activation of the brain that you get out of music. And then the second principle is the neuroplasticity, that only does you good if at some point you can take the music away and see the carryover effect, because you can't be walking around in daily life all the time with music. That's just simply not feasible. But the great thing about music and neuroplasticity is that, like, if you are exposing your brain to something advantageous, it will be able to carry over into the future when you take that stimulus away.
Lauren, do you have any favorite music for the walking? I'm a bit like Linda. I had a stroke at 65 and I used to run as well.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is really any music. Are any of you musicians out there?
No.
If I say a 4/4 time signature, does that mean anything to you? Okay.
That's Ralph.
Okay, so just really quick music theory lesson. When you are listening to music, it's always in a certain time signature. And most of the popular music that we listen to is in 4/4 time, which actually mimics kind of a healthy walking tempo or healthy walking rhythm. So when you walk, the ideal and what you like learn if you've had a walking impairment and you're in physical therapy is you try to put one foot in front of the other and you try to create that like kind of even cadence. So what we recommend is, because that's the kind of cadence that a 4/4 time signature is in, we recommend that the music is always in that time signature. Beyond that, it doesn't matter what kind of music you're listening to, as long as it's like mimicking a healthy gait pattern. So you wouldn't want something like a waltz, because then you start walking, it makes your gait even more wonky. And that's, neuroplasticity could work in a negative way too. Like, you don't want to retrain your brain in the wrong way. And so what our music therapists do, and what this application that we're also building right now is supposed to do, is it calls the internet and the music library that it has for songs that fit both your interests, but also fit that 4/4 time signature, so that it's therapeutically advantageous. But then beyond that, if you like listening to rock and roll, or you like pop, or, as long as it's in that kind of signature that mimics the healthy gait, which a lot of music luckily is, then you're good to go, and you're doing something that's good for you, at least when it comes to walking.
What about sleep? Listening to music in bed.
Even if you're not listening to music, even if the end is not to improve functioning, like a functional outcome such as gait, or upper extremity movement, or cognitive functioning, or speech and language, even if you're just listening to music because, like Linda attested to, it is soothing and it calms you down, there's so much that music can do when you're just listening to it passively. It releases, chemicals in your brain that make you feel good, and that kind of give you almost like a high, like you would get from running, or, eating good food. Like, it actually changes, just by listening to it, it can change your physiology in a way that can be really helpful. So listening to music is beneficial on so many levels, even if you're not engaging with a music therapy technique and you're just passively listening to music that you enjoy, it can be really helpful. They've also found that when you are doing music therapy, if you're able to pair it if you're able to pair the therapy with music that you prefer, they've actually tied that to better outcomes. So listening to preferred music is always preferable too.
I got two things that I can say about that, and they're from a while back, but you just touched on one of them, and that is I know I worked with somebody locally. She's actually was hit by a car and had a TBI, but she presents exactly like stroke, one side weakness, and of course it was her left side, so it affected her language center. And she learned how to speak again by listening to her favorite songs. And after a little while, she was able to start mouthing some of the words in the chorus, and then getting the whole chorus, and then moving on to some of the verses. And then it translated to her speech therapy that she was getting from a registered speech therapist. But the key was really her involving her brain with the music that she knew, because she, in a sense, reconnected with that music and helped her brain reconnect with those parts that involved talking through singing. And well, that just popped in my head. Went to a stroke group one time at the rehab hospital I was talking about, and they had a minister there who had never sang, and he couldn't talk, but he could sing.
Mm.
I found that really interesting. I've heard of that before too. The other thing that I would say was slightly off, but it has to do with the rhythm aspect. The other day, I have a friend who doesn't sleep very well, and I just accidentally bumped into this TED talk from this guy who had trouble sleeping, and he's got a secret to teach you how to go to sleep, and it involves rhythm. Basically, you slap on your thighs, in a rhythm, and then you slow it down, and then you lay down. And it's I just thought it was real interesting because you were talking about the rhythms involved in music, and he does it. I'll send it to you, Lauren.
Yeah, I would be really interested. And truthfully, like when we talk about the way that music can affect functioning, 90% at least of what we do at MedRhythms is focused on the rhythm. That's why I said, as long as the rhythm is going to be clinically advantageous, you can listen to any style of music. It won't change the outcome that you have. However, you might like get where you want faster if you are listening to user preferred music because of the way that the brain interacts with that and the chemicals that are released when you listen to music you like. But even if you're just listening to a metronome, like you can still get benefits from music therapy without like having, the music that we think of on the radio. Like having just a rhythmic stimulus is really beneficial.
I think, Lauren, we did some research long back where we found that when you listen to uplifting music, there is a physiological basis that the brain releases endorphins. We used to measure endorphins and the blood level of volunteers listening to music. And when they listen to the music, the endorphin levels goes up. So the pituitary gland responds, the brain cells response, the hypothalamus response, and then we see the increased level of these painkillers we call endorphins.
Absolutely. I wasn't even going to get that into detail, but that's really interesting. Were you part of the group that was doing that research?
Yeah, I think we were doing the research at Ohio State. I'm a professor at Ohio State. So it was done, it was done in my group.
Yeah. It's amazing the number of things that can happen when your brain is on music, so to speak.
So I can plug some earphones in this and go for a walk then.
Oh, sorry, say again.
I can plug some earphones in my phone and then go for a walk.
Yeah, it's honestly the problem is right now music therapy interventions have only been available in person, but at the very least, just going out and walking to music, if you have a gait impairment, that is going to help. As long as the speed of the song is not like crazy fast or way too slow. So you have to kind of find that like right balance and the sweet spot for your own baseline cadence. But what we're trying to do with MedRhythms is make it such that, so we started as a therapy services company, and we only had music therapists working with people in person. But now we kind of pivoted as a company. We still have the clinical practice, but we also have this medical device division of the company where we're trying to basically build an app that uses sensor technology and plays music through headphones to try to recreate that experience. And the app is smart, so it recognizes your baseline, but it, like a music therapist would, it starts to slowly increase the tempo according to your clinical, kind of the clinical signals that it's receiving from you. That being said, it's smart enough to know if you're showing signs of fatigue or if there are any potentials for falling or things like that. So there's definitely right now there's something you can do on your phone, which is going out and just listening to music, and hopefully this app will also be able to be available to people in the not too distant future so that you can have it on your phone.
That'd be good.
Thank you.
That's similar to, I think you experienced what I ended up experiencing. So you're sitting there and you're doing it one-on-one and you say, how can we get to more people? Same way, like I'm helping people one-on-one. I have a mentor on what I do, actually. So some people find that surprising, but I have a friend of mine, I meet with him regularly, and I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So but like the trying to scale particularly like if somebody lives in a rural area and they don't live near somebody that is trained in these interventions, like that's a huge percentage of the stroke survivor population. And that's what we've identified at MedRhythms is our practice. It's centered in Boston, and we're really only able to serve the people that we're fortunate enough to, like, you know, have a caregiver to take them to the clinic, and we're able to get there for those one-on-one services, and it's just not feasible for everybody. So that's really what we're trying to do now, is focus on meeting that unmet need. But this is all so helpful, and I want to be able to, you know, get to some more of the questions that Ralph and I came up with. And I'm so happy to talk to anybody as well, like more about music and neuroscience off of this call. I'm always happy to like answer any questions, and you can definitely reach out to me and pick my brain. I can put my contact info in here too.
Please do, if you don't mind. I would love that.
Yeah, I will.
Please do.
Well, another question that we had, and also Chris, I think you jumped in when we were kind of wrapping up the first question. So I guess before moving on, does anybody have any other thoughts about the kind of content or you know, activities that happen in these Facebook groups for stroke survivors that make being in the group so enjoyable? Like what are your favorite elements of being part of these groups?
I think sharing ideas is the main one.
Yeah.
More than the social thing. It's just a question of you got this in your mind. You want to find out, get other people's opinions.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that too, Linda, that having the ability to learn is really helpful.
Yeah.
I happen to know a little bit about Chris because I've actually tried to help him jump in and help, and this is part of what I think he's saying and part of why the groups are good. So he's got so a couple specific issues to his walking, and he asks people from time to time about them, and of course, you know, which is a good idea, Chris, because people change out in these groups and you don't do it so often that it's annoying or anything, and you get different answers. So, you know, you can bring up a subject like, you know, how do you deal with drop foot, or all of a sudden my strong side leg is weak. Anybody experience that? So you find that there's a lot of information out there that you wouldn't normally be able to get to without associating with other stroke survivors. The doctors don't have it because they're not living through it. So, you know, Chris typically gets, you know, 10 or 15 people jumping on trying to, well, I do this, and have you tried that? And I know he's tried a lot, and some of them are repeats because I followed him for a couple of years trying to pitch in when I can. But I think that whole thing, it's kind of a further thing about I'm not alone, okay, because you post about some difficulty you're having and 15 people try and help you, and you know, first of all, oftentimes give you some good help. You gotten any good help, Chris?
Yeah, it's very good, very good. I think you're probably the most experienced member of the group, so that's some of your comments have been very useful.
Well, I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but thank you.
No.
I'm more active than most people. Most of the group owners don't do anything in their groups. And I'm thinking, well, why do you have a group if all you're going to do is get rid of the herbal doctors and the, you know, I'll send you $1 million people. You know, to me, it seems like, you know, I started the group because I wanted to get good information out. And I actually am a member of about 10 groups, and I read lots and lots of posts. So one of the useful things that I can do is, even if I don't have experience, somebody was asking about HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I said, well, in my experience, less than 20% of people find it useful. And I also said, There was another one the other day, and I posted on that. I think that most of the reason that only 20% of people find it useful is hyperbaric oxygen is like mirror box therapy. It takes a long time for it to kick in. And I think that 80% of stroke survivors who aren't getting anything out of it have a short attention cycle, and they're unable to, you know, put in the information. So there are lots of things that I can, because I'm so active, that I can comment on, even if I don't have personal experience. You know, somebody was saying, you know, well, somebody posted about how they were having trouble with both their eyes and they only had a stroke on one side. And, you know, people chimed in, well, that's impossible. And I said, no, it's not impossible, because I had an eye test right before my stroke, and I had one after, the field of vision thing where they put up the green things and you click the button for the dots. And they told me that I lost the vision on the inside of both my eyes, the part where it overlaps. So it's not an issue, but it was measurable and it was in both eyes. And I also worked with a woman who had a cerebral stroke, and it definitely affected both of her eyes. So there's just so much information out there. It wasn't real helpful to the person who was arguing that it was impossible. However, it was real useful to the original poster who was trying to put pictures together better. And that's a function of the two sides of the brain working together. I remembered some eye exercises that I used to do with Kelly, who had the cerebral stroke. We did them. She made me do them when I arrived and before I left, because she felt that they did that much good. And I did them for the whole 5 years. I went and saw her 3 times a week. And she couldn't track. Her eyes went like this in the beginning, and she couldn't track at all. They were twitchy. And did they end up perfect? No. Could she, did they stop being twitchy? Yes. Could she track? Yes. Did it help her with her balance? Absolutely. Because if you can't see right, you got no balance. After a stroke, we're a lot more dependent on verticals and horizontals. If you don't believe me, just go in your backyard one night in the pitch black dark and try and walk across it. You'll feel like you're about to walk into anything and everything, because you can't.
On the subject of eyesight, I had a issue. My left eye, which was my dominant eye, went because of my stroke. I had to have an operation on it. And my right eye, which was my weak eye, suddenly turned into a dominant eye. And it turned from being short-sighted to being near perfect long sight. So the brain obviously does change.
Isn't the brain an amazing thing? There's so many people out there who don't realize that the power of the brain and try and harness that power of that brain in their own recovery. Well, of course, that's a whole nother subject, because a lot of people out there think that somebody else or some device or the physical therapist or something else is going to make them better. They haven't had the realization yet that you have to own it. It's your recovery. The cavalry's not coming. You want to get better, you best figure out how to build your own at-home program and stick to it and have a good attitude, because that's the way it's the way it worked for me, and that's the way I see all the people who I consider kicking butt are doing that. And Chris, you know some of them, Neil Isaac and David Lauderdale, and I mean, this isn't happening without a good attitude and without them, you know, trying to kick butt every day when you get up. But like I said, that's a whole nother subject. So Lauren, why don't you ask another question so we can at least get through the 5 basic questions?
Absolutely. Well, the next one that Ralph and I were very curious to hear your opinions on is, what content do you wish you saw more of in Stroke Buddies and other Facebook groups that you might be a part of, and why?
Well, for me, most of the people that I see or that appear, because you can't really control everything on your Facebook page. I mean, there are algorithms and other things that, or at least for me, appear. So I can only control it so much. So I would like to see a little more of people at my level, which is kind of a very slow and recovery level. And I do see people, and it may just be that's the dynamic, or it may be I have to somehow adjust the input I put into Facebook in order to get more of an output. It's
No,
not.
I have a problem with this. See, I recovered pretty well, and one of my problems is, well, no, it's not a problem. An issue for me in my thinking has to always be like, take it down a notch, because like, so I do a video on sit to stand, or and somebody says, well, I can't do this, and or I do a video on something on the mat, and somebody will say, I can't get down on the mat. How do you get out of a wheelchair? So then I make a video on how to get out of a wheelchair, and somebody else says, when I'm down on the ground, I can't get back into my wheelchair, or if I fall, how? So I tend to think too high level, and I've had a number of times where people would say, I can't do that. Take it down a notch. Take it down another notch. So actually, I'm going to reshoot it. I shot it with my cell phone, but when my cameraman comes next week, I'm going to get on the floor, and I'm going to show people how to crawl over to a couch without using the arm and leg on one side. That's not easy to do. It's very interesting for me to do this stuff because, like, I get down on the floor and I start trying to crawl once, without my left side, and my brain already knows how to do it. So I have to try and remember to forget how to do it. And there's two ways. When you get over the couch, you can like kind of pull yourself up, but some people can't do that. So I'm also going to teach the get your shoulders and back up on there and flip flop like a fish until you get your hips up. Once you get your hips up, you're good.
That'll be a great video, because I know for me and for so many other people who are limited, we don't think about getting on the floor. It's a very big deal. Even when I was working with physical therapists, that was like the last thing, getting up and down off the floor. And it was just only doing that, getting down, getting up, no more.
Yeah, well, it's not a simple thing.
Great video. No, it's not.
But I work with Kelly for 5 years, and after she crawled for about 3, we got her standing and working on her balance, and then wanted to get her on the mat because there are a lot of good core work. Core is, when people ask, like, what would you tell your young stroke survivor self, like, a month in after your stroke, that you know now that you didn't know then? And I would say one of the things I always say is the importance of core, because I had no idea how important core is, and it is. So we wanted to get her down on the ground, doing knee stands, and then doing long and short lever, doing knee stands. And then eventually I would push her. I made a joke about it to the physical therapist I work with. I said, yeah, well, one day we'll probably just be bopping on you. And he said, the physical therapist turned to me and said, exactly right, but we're not there yet. It was a way of, like, in a safe way. I was also there to, catch her if anything happened, but you have to learn how to, where center is again, where that string coming out of the top of your head is, so you can hold, if you watch me here, I'll do this. I'll notice I'm like leaning this way a little bit. If you watch me in these Zoom things, you'll see me go, oh, wait a minute now. And of course, it's all backwards. So you go to tilt your head the way you think and you make it worse, but you'll see me, go back to center here like that a lot, because I think it's real important to maintain center and symmetry, because they all help with balance. So it took, we did 10 in and outs of the chair for about 4, 5, 6 months till she could do it, safely. what we were trying to do is get her so she could do it at home on her own alone, so she could get on the mat and do additional mat work without me having to be there and her still being safe. So that was the goal, and we managed to achieve that. So
It's wonderful.
Tricia, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I got mixed up on the time. I'm in Missouri, so I'm on Central Time.
no
So-
problem. I wondered where you were, because you were the one who bumped it up for me. I went to bump it up to the top last night, and I noticed you'd already, said, see everybody tomorrow, and bumped it to the top. So thank you.
And we were just talking about, what, and just also to kind of add a little bit of I should have prefaced that question with this, but to add a little more context, since MedRhythms is thinking of developing a community for stroke survivors to engage with each other and information as well, and since Ralph has already created this community, but is also, as only one individual who doesn't have all the resources of a company behind him, is kind of interested in like seeing how, potentially MedRhythms could work with him and we could kind of share content in the future. We want to know, like, what is it that you feel you don't have access to right now as a stroke survivor, whether it be information or opportunities, that we could ideally provide to you through one of these groups. What content opportunities do you feel you have either limited or no access to that would be, really helpful in improving your quality of life or your experience in these groups?
I'm not sure whether my problem is stroke related or dystonia related, because about 4 years ago I started getting dystonia, which is basically muscle spasticity. So on my good days, I'm actually quite good. I can do most things, but on my bad days, I get such tight muscles that I can't do a lot. So I don't know whether there's any secrets to reducing spasticity or not.
Oh, excuse me, I've got to go. I apologize. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, Ralph, and thanks to the rest of you. Bye-bye.
And I'll have to go also. It was nice meeting you all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Bye. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
bye. I'll see you again.
Chris, you always ask the tough questions.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are, hey, when you have a stroke, you're faced with a lot of tough questions. One of the things that, I've thought about in these groups was maybe bringing in some experts. I have a relationship. I run a second group called Young Stroke Survivors Support Group. And I do that for the Medical University of South Carolina's Stroke Recovery Research Center. That's a mouthful. And the Medical University of South Carolina has these health tips, where they have this woman, Bobby Connor, and she talks to all kinds of different people, and they have these little 2-minute health tips. And I proposed to them, why aren't we doing the same thing with stroke? Why don't we get neurologists and physical therapists and whatever and talk to them? Lauren and I talked about this because her company has some of these expert types. And I pointed out that, how can I say this in a nice way? A lot of times experts don't really know what we need, and they kind of pontificate, And like I've seen your basic presentation on stroke and stroke prevention probably about 20 times live, and it's pretty similar the whole time. And once you've seen it twice, you kind of got it. So I don't think that a lot of times the experts hit the target, being left to their own devices, because they don't have enough familiarity with us as their audience. So one of the things I suggested to Lauren was, hey, I'm pretty good at interviewing, and I've got a kind of a handle on this whole, what do survivors, really want to know? Maybe we could try something with the experts where I interview them, or I submit the questions to Lauren, so that we kind of can try to steer them in a direction that's useful to us and less pontification. And it's not their fault. They're doing it in a void. No one operates well in a void. You know, getting feedback is key. Kind of what we're doing right now, isn't it, Lauren?
And it's something that, like, you know, that this initiative to try to create more opportunities for stroke survivors, you know, it's something that we don't want to just exist in a silo. Like, we would be so excited to create content that can be shared on these different platforms like Stroke Buddies group and others, really whatever will help stroke survivors get access to the information that they want and that they need. And I mean, I think that the concept of bringing forces together where MedRhythms has access to all these experts, you know, Ralph has so many connections in the stroke survivor community world, plus that patient experience perspective could be really interesting. But I guess I also want to put it to all of you, is that something you all would be interested in? Like, if there was an interview or a webinar or something available to Stroke Buddies, where an expert in neurology or an expert in stroke rehabilitation, or, you know, is that something that's of interest to all of you?
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
Would be to me, because I'm always trying to pick experts' brains.
Yeah.
What my job is try and, I have, you know, I actually have registered strokebuddies.org. I mentioned earlier about my mentor. I remembered what I lost my train of thought on, and that was the fact that I'm one guy. So I'm a shoemaker. Think of me like the shoemaker. The shoemaker gets sick, no shoes are getting made. The shoemaker is out to lunch, no shoes are getting made. The shoemaker's asleep and he wakes up to herbal doctors. They're not getting deleted, you know? So how do you scale things up? So, you know, a lot of what I'm trying to do, and I won't put out bad information. If I don't know something, I'll look it up, or I'll offer it as an opinion. But, you know, one of the things that I'm always trying to do is learn about things. When somebody asks me a question, you know, and I think I know something about dystonia, but Chris mentioned it, and my initial reaction when he mentioned that 10 minutes ago is, I don't know enough about that, so I'll look it up. And in doing that, then I feel like I can pass on stuff like, you know, 20% of people are only think HBOT is helpful, but I think the other 80% aren't putting in their time, you know? So if you're going to try it, stick with it. Same with talking to a neurologist or a physical therapist. God, I'd love to. So one of the ideas that I've talked about is I've got strokebuddies.org, would be taking it to a nonprofit, being able to get donations and stuff. I don't want to make any money. I have money. This costs me money to pay my cameraman and stuff. I'm fine with that. But if I had some money coming in, then I could do things like, I'd love to have a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and a neurologist on retainer, be sending them $1,000 a month or whatever, and have them actively participate, answer questions. Because we all have questions and we can't go to our neurologists regularly. Mine said, well, we did another scan and your brain's stable, so I'm releasing you. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means I don't need to see you anymore. I said, what if I want to see you? You're one of my only sources of information. He said, well, then you keep coming and seeing me. And so I did, until they made him a pediatric neurologist and they grandfathered me in. And I went a couple more times and then they said I couldn't see him anymore, and I haven't. So we don't have access, Lauren, to, you know, things like, you know, we can't pick up the phone and call a neurologist once a week. You're too young.
Something that luckily, you know, if there was an interest, it sounded like, Trisha, you mentioned that you would be interested in this. Like, if it seems like it's something people are interested in, I think that that's something like I could pitch to MedRhythms. I could say, you know, like X number of people are interested in having these kinds of interviews. They feel it would be helpful. And we do have access to lots of neurologists, and some of the top researchers in stroke recovery are, you know, on our advisory board. And there's definitely a lot we can do to help there. But I guess I'm curious to know, like, which, you know, what kinds of people would you want to hear from? Like, what would you find most interesting? Like, you know, Trisha, I guess since you mentioned that it's something you would be interested in, who would you be interested in hearing from? What kinds of people?
Probably neurologist for sure.
Probably a deep dive into certain things rather than a cursory sort of a.
I'd love to interview a neuro-trained physical therapist on neuroplasticity and how the brain learns, because a lot of physical therapists who don't have that neuro training don't bring that to the whole relationship, and it's really a key. If I have worked with NDT trained or neurodevelopment trained physical therapists, and they have a completely different outlook and attitude on things. It always starts with how the brain works and works backwards from there. I find that some of the other physical therapists, depending on how good they are, the ones who aren't so good kind of like refer back to the book, and there is no book, of course, but it's a term. They refer back to the standard bag of tricks and pull something out of the bag of tricks to entertain you or engage you. And I initially took a stroke survivor for a year and a half, twice a week, 150 visits with an NDT trained physical therapist, and she let me come in the back. And I learned that she would let me ask one question at the end of the session. So I would save up my most important question and ask and try and learn. Because again, here, I see my job as trying to learn all I can and passing it on to other stroke survivors. Like I always say, I want to be that guy I wish I could talk to. I wish I could have talked to shortly after my stroke.
Yeah.
Because I got out of the hospital and I was like, okay, now what? Who do I ask like a simple basic question to? So that was why I thought about video, and why I eventually turned the camera on myself, and why I got involved in the Facebook group, and why I'm going to get bigger than Facebook, because Facebook's a chat thing and it pushes everything down. So, you know, yeah, we need some motivational memes and stuff like that, but you get too much of that and the real content's getting pushed off the board. And Facebook's terrible at searching. I can't even find my own posts. I favorite my own posts and put keywords in so I can find them again, because Facebook's useless for that kind of thing. And I was telling people, well, just go to the videos tab. My videos I was uploading on Facebook before I had a YouTube channel, but I didn't upload them. I put them on Facebook. I kept telling people, just go to the videos tab. And finally, somebody said to me, like a year and a half in, dude, I have a phone. There's no video tab. And then somebody else said, I have a phone. I have tabs, but they're on the top. They're not on the left. So I got a Samsung, an iPhone, an iPad, Windows computer, and a Mac computer. And I'm here to tell you that Facebook presents differently in every single device. So you can't give anybody any comprehensive advice on how to find anything. So
Lauren, I like to see the various rehabilitation device makers. They use the different gadgets and they can demonstrate their devices, how they can help in the exercise. Because I think in my case, some hand braces were recommended to me, but nobody told me how long I had to wear those braces. You know, there was no recommendation. After 3 years, I stopped working using the hand braces because it was giving me difficult time in sleeping at night. but the doctors or therapists never told me how long I had to wear them. So the experts in therapy, experts in the rehabilitation, experts who have the knowledge about these things, they will be really very helpful.
That's really interesting because it's kind of not what I had hypothesized. I thought people would be more interested in hearing from like providers and people in research, but what you're saying is kind of, hearing from people in industry is actually really helpful. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it also makes sense because I'm assuming you all hadn't heard of MedRhythms before today. We're not a big pharma company. We're not one of those companies that has billions of dollars in, that we can put toward ads and, getting the information out there. And there's lots of other really interesting companies, particularly in this space of digital therapeutics, companies that are doing great work for stroke survivors and people who have, very common diseases and injuries, but their information just isn't out there. So yeah, and those are people we have, and industry players that we have a lot of connections with and would definitely be able to bring on to an interview and possibly have somebody like Ralph interview them and possibly even demonstrate some of the things that they do. That kind of info would be helpful.
So like clinical trial things kind of is what you're talking about?
Or even just, it sounded like you were even saying just having somebody demonstrating what devices are out there and how they work and the efficacy behind them. But maybe there's opportunities for some of them that are in clinical trials for you to like also learn about how to enroll in those. I don't know. I'm just kind of brainstorming here. I'm sure it would vary company to company.
What would be very powerful is if you could do a before and after scenario where before this person was like this, but we did this, and after they had improved a bit.
How's about Ralph have a go-to page and list down all the neurosurgeons that he has interviews with and write down all the information they gave, as well as the neuroplasticity person, PT, OT, and all that, and have a go-to page that everyone can go to that particular page and kind of research all of that at one location versus going all over the Facebook and YouTube and get lost and all that.
That's the idea behind Stroke Buddies, would be to have tabs on videos, tabs on occupational therapy, a tab on articles, and then you go to articles and it says PBA, it says Botox, it says, various things, so that you can drill down and find the information that you want, like a library. Basically, it's like a library. And I can't do that on Facebook. And I have strokebuddies.org registered. I paid for it for 2 years, kind of like Zoom, time to do something about it. Somebody kick me in the butt, please. I have to learn how to do, I've done some blogging. I'm okay at writing HTML. I got to learn WordPress or something. And I got to have the time. Part of my issue is
Ralph. I can actually do WordPress, so I can help you out there if you need. But,
that would be great.
Yep. Yeah.
I've thought about it. I actually have a post. I got together like pictures of different kind of experts, because I'd love to have like somebody who could run a reference librarian would be perfect. Somebody who did help with web stuff, and somebody, a lawyer and an accountant to help me form a 501c3. I'm always hesitant to ask for help. I don't know why. Well, let me tell you something. Two things that occurred to me earlier, but I always have too much to say, and I don't really want to interrupt or make it be all about me. And one is that what I heard from Trish and other people here is what they're interested in is where the rubber meets the road. We get so much high-level information on this is a stroke, and okay, but I had a hemorrhagic. Now you're talking about ischemic stroke. I know about them. We get a lot of high-level stuff, but we don't get a lot of stuff sometimes that's really relevant to us. How do we make the rubber meet the road? And the other thing I would say is I have no problem. I don't like the herbal scammers and stuff like that. And I don't like people just, you know, we get people who say, you know, I need one of these $80,000 robotic arms. And I want to go, yeah, but you're still going to have to learn how to, you're either going to walk around with that forever, then you can't pay for it, or you're going to have to learn how to operate your arm at some point anyway. But I also see, like Larry Bohannon with Quadricizer as an example. He builds a product and he promotes that product, but he does it by giving stroke tips. He's used a number of my stroke tips and videos, and he'll say, and so he just puts, you know, it's brought to you by Quadricizer, and he's got a stroke tip, and there's a way you can click on a Quadricizer link, but he's not slapping you in the face with it. So what I'm saying is, as a group owner, and I can't speak for other group owners, I don't mind promoting a company that's providing good information, you know, because guess what? They're going to have to sell some of their product in order to keep supplying us with experts and to stay in business and to pay Lauren's salary and, you know, all those kinds of things. You have to be realistic about this stuff. I mean, I don't think that you know, I'm looking at my driveway and I don't see a neurologist, a physical therapist, and an occupational therapist walking up my driveway right now to volunteer. So partnering makes some level of sense. Do I want to endorse things? I don't know, not particularly. Are you endorsing things by partnering? Somewhat. Can you pick partners that actually have a good product? Yeah, you can. Like, say, Flint Rehab.
Yeah.
They make good devices and they put out good information. Their web pages, I use them a lot. They're very informational. They got a real good one on how Botox works. That's basically the message I'm trying to get out. If you don't do your physical therapy while you're loose, all you're doing is getting shots that go away in a few months. You know, I mean, people think, I'm always trying to get people away from the whole magic bullet thing. You know, got one right now hanging out, Dr. Tobenic. I told her that I'm gonna delete it as soon as she likes my comment or this meeting's over with, because it's bad information. So I kind of long-winded, but I would have no problem partnering with people that are trying to do the same thing, despite the fact that they're commercial and I'm not. And because if we get access to information, that's more important than whatever. And you know, the companies that do a good job with this don't try and ram it down anybody's throat. They understand it would be beneficial to you guys as well, to Med Rhythms, if such a thing existed, because you know, well, because I'd promote it in Young Stroke as well. I'd you know, start posting there, and maybe if we want to get more people, I'll post these Zoom meetings and make a joint between Stroke Buddies and Young Stroke. But between the two groups, there's 13,000 people already.
Right.
I'm here to tell you that if you do that, Chris and Wendy and Trisha are going to have a warm, fuzzy feeling about your company. And, you know, you don't have to slap people in the face. Somebody who, you know, I think you'd sell more product. I think that some people click on that link, you know, and find out more about, okay, what's, you know, what is their product? I keep seeing them provide me with good information, you know. People will start to feel like, do they have anything? I do. Do they have anything that I could use because they're helping support me and I should turn around and help support them? And I'm telling you, as a group owner, I have no problem partnering with somebody who isn't going to try and ram their product down people's throats and slap them in the face. I take the same kind of approach. I just lay it out there. And if you want to pick it up, you pick it up. I'm not going to hit you over the head with it.
Yeah. Well, we can also take this conversation more offline too, but it's definitely, it's definitely something good to think about, and we should talk about it more.
Well, yeah, and I sent you the beginnings of that symposium idea. Because see, I think that people like me, Neil Isaac, David Lauderdale, Edmund Tan, some of the higher level people that figure this stuff out and figure out how to build their own program, we're inventing stuff. I'm inventing stuff. I'm making shooting potato videos. I mean, somebody out there knows about it, but nobody ever told me that you can use the right. They taught me about oppositional therapy, but nobody said you can actually pattern one side of your brain visually by doing something with the strong side and then doing it by the weak side. I just had this. I was making potato salad one day. That's why they were potatoes, and I had this nutty idea. I can't get all these nutty ideas out of my head. It's maybe a good thing. So that's why we have a potato video.
Yeah. Well, this is great. And I'm really excited to talk about, what partnership between this group and MedRhythms could look like. And then, of course, hopefully I can continue to ask you all, Chris, Trisha, and Winnie, for feedback on what you actually, as we're trying to develop content, like what actually is it that stroke survivors want? It's interesting because you all mentioned slightly different things. And I think that just speaks to the fact that every stroke survivor is a unique individual and everybody has unique needs. Whether it's getting really in-depth information about a specific kind of impairment and recovery, or it's getting information about different products, things like that. But we also wanted to ask one last question too about, at this point, what do you all feel would improve the quality of your life as stroke survivors the most?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a loaded question, so you can take your time thinking about it.
Well, in my case, it's on my good days, I'm quite happy. Just eliminating the bad days, but that tends to be spasticity related. So I don't know how common this is amongst stroke survivors.
I don't either, but I'm gonna find out because I want to know. I think it's information, but I don't want to. I'm hesitant to speak for everybody. I speak too much.
One thing I think would be a good thing to research on or whatever, talk about, is the depression that comes with it. Because I actually last night I was just talking to a friend of mine. His wife had a stroke, and he's like, she's really depressed. And I said, have her call me. And I just did some therapy for 2.5 months. I just got done with it, and everybody in there was, and I kind of sent them to your page. Hopefully that people start joining. But depression, it's and I had it too, but I didn't know nothing about it till I found this group. I learned, but the depression is a big thing when you first have your stroke.
Oh yeah. That was one of the things that we did in that other Zoom talk Sunday. We were talking about attitude, because maintaining a good attitude is one of the things that you can do to fight that depression. And it's a tough subject. I mean, I give people my phone number all the time. About a third of the time they call. So I talk to somebody once a month on this subject, and they're never short conversations. I mean, they're an hour or two. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but a lot of the thing with depression is similar to the whole thing with stroke. To know that there's somebody else out there that's, I think the thing that people find valuable in talking to me about it is not so much what I say, but the fact that I went through it all, and that I'm willing to share it, and that they're not alone. And, it's really a tough subject because, as you know, Trish, you can't just tell somebody to get over it. Well,
Right.
Okay. I mean, they make up memes about 10 things not to say,
I think keeping busy on a project on something it does help.
Yes.
Certainly keeps me away from it.
I tell people a couple of things. I tell them to stay in the moment, because we all tend to have trouble with the past and the future. When you think about the future as a stroke survivor, you know, especially early on, it's easy to worry about, you know, where you're going to be, because you don't know what you can do and you don't know what you're going to be able to do in 6 months. And it's just not a good place to go. I mean, you have to plan your life and your future, but dwelling on the past or dwelling in the future are both. So I advise people to stay in the moment. Therefore, I advise people to find things that they're passionate about, hobbies, interests. What did you like to do before the stroke? Well, why can't you do that now, or some modified version of that? Don't shut yourself off because you're having troubles. Try and find the things that, you know, were a part of you, or find new things. When you're passionate about stuff, you get involved in them. I also tell people, if they're able to volunteer. Volunteer to help somebody, volunteer with a nonprofit. Guess what? You don't meet crappy people when you volunteer.
Great point.
They're all volunteers too. And I think that it's important to be around, when you're struggling, I think it's important to be around positivity.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, you know, those are my little messages, instead of, you know, we'll just get over it. You know, I did do some, what I called fake it till you can make it, or dive till tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. I was lucky. I was depressed and I could string 2 or 3 days together, but I never strung months together. So I could always tell myself, gonna wake up tomorrow with another chance. I never went to bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'd sometimes do what I'd just get involved in day-to-day stuff and do what I call dive till tomorrow. Wash the dishes, you know, do stuff, do mindless stuff until it's bedtime, go to sleep, and you wake up with a new attitude, a new chance.
Yep.
You have faith and you pray. That will help a lot.
Yes. And you also believe that there's always hope for the future, because there is, as long as you believe that.
Definitely. Winnie, what would you feel would improve your quality of life at this time?
Because I didn't go through the depression stage, I always kept myself busy, and I kept telling me, what if today is your last day to survive? What would you do? And so I would make a list of 5 things, as well as try and get all of that done within the day. And then if that wasn't enough, I would call a friend up to just spend the time with her and just talk, at least, because to me, talking made a lot of difference. And so, I don't know, I felt better after that. But it's like when people come over to my place, they stay for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's okay. But if they stay a long time, like about half an hour, 45 minutes, then after they leave, I would get depressed. But I said, stop it, Winnie. Right away, I would say, stop it, Winnie. You have things to do. And I would start making things to, you know, like even doing Sudoku. It's like just to get my mind filled. It helped. So I don't know.
Getting back to the present.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Lauren, you know, one of my questions is, how often does everybody want to see these meetings? I mean, I'm willing to do them once a week if people want. I mean, typically in-person meetings, they don't do more than once a month. But I think we could talk about stroke once a week for an hour forever.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe I'll talk to you and see if next Tuesday works. I think it would be good to have a regular time, like, so people could get used to it and build it into their schedule, that kind of thing. You know, we can't hit everybody in the world.
Right.
And so we can keep doing this, and you can like come forever or drop out. As far as I'm concerned, you know, you have an equal voice to anybody here. You can keep asking your questions. It's fine with me because I want to know the answers too.
Well, thank you all so much for letting me join.
I'm trying to serve the same community you are, you know?
Sorry, Chris, what was that? Or Chris, did you say something?
Oh, I just said a regular slot's a good idea.
Yeah. And obviously it doesn't have to be. We went for a really long time today, but we can make these more bite-sized meetings too, particularly if they're happening so frequently,
Sure.
so that more people, so it doesn't feel overwhelming. I think that's a great idea.
I can do a better job of, today I just kind of let this go. So, I mean, I can do a better job of saying, okay, we're talking about depression and keep it on depression.
Yeah.
We're talking about 3 things and keep it on those 3 things and say, okay, it's time to move on because otherwise we aren't going to get to our 3 things. You know, so I can take a more active role as the host or whatever. Like I said, I'm new to this. So, and I'm not afraid to, I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm not afraid to wing it. I mean, you know, how else are we going to learn how to get better at this? Other than showing up and trying it. So,
yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, 11 a.m. on Tuesdays works for me into the future. So,
okay, well, I'll set up another one for next Tuesday and promote it in the group.